Have you ever just looked at our financial and social systems and felt like there's something else going on? Like there's a set of hidden rules and architecture just beneath the surface that dictates how everything really works? Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. We're going to pull back the curtain on that very architecture. This is the story we're all sold, right? That the system is this giant solid fortress. It's supposed to be impenetrable, totally fair, and something you just have to work within. But here's the thing. According to the analysis we're looking at, this very idea is the system's first line of defense. It's designed to make you not look too closely. But what if that whole idea is just wrong? What if that solid fortress is actually full of cracks and gaps? What if the monolith is just a myth? Honestly, asking that one question, that's what unlocks a completely different way of seeing everything around us. Because the reality is, it's way more interesting than a big block of stone. These massive systems we live in, they're often held together by some surprisingly fragile stuff. We're talking decades-old computer code, rules that haven't been updated since the 90s, and, just plain old human biases. And all that fragility, it creates friction. It creates these little points where the whole machine slows down, gets stuck, or just plain breaks. And that right there is the central point. Those friction points aren't just glitches in the matrix. They're opportunities. I mean, think about it. Wherever you find bureaucracy or big institutions that are just too slow to change, or outdated rules that create a lag, that's where value starts to pull up. It's in those slowdowns that you find the real, unwritten rules of the game. So this brings us to a really crucial concept: latency arbitrage. Now, this isn't about day trading stocks or anything like that. It's a much bigger idea. It's all about the gap in time, that lag, between when a system starts to fail or crack and the moment when everybody else finally realizes it. That gap, that latency, that's your window. That's the entry point. Okay, so where do we actually find these opportunities? Well, you start by mapping the system's stress points. So let's look at 3 specific areas where, if you dig just a little bit, the official math it completely stops making sense. First up is this idea of credit syntheticism. So much of modern lending is run by algorithms now, right? But these algorithms, they aren't magic. They're just following a script. If you can understand that script, what data points they look for, the ratios they care about, you can essentially find ghost qualifications. You can build a profile that meets the algorithm's logic perfectly, even if it doesn't look like what a human loan officer from 20 years ago would call a perfect borrower. Our second friction point is information asymmetry. Big institutions, banks, governments, you name it, they collect just mountains of data. But the thing is, they're often too big and too siloed to actually connect the dots. The real opportunity is in synthesizing that data that's already out there, making the connections that the institutions themselves are too bogged down to see. It's like they're lost in the trees, and you have the chance to see the whole forest. And finally, we have credential arbitrage. Oh, this is a big one for sure. We're seeing this huge growing gap between what a formal degree or a fancy certificate says you can do and what the market actually needs and is willing to pay for. The arbitrage is in exploiting that gap, focusing on what has real utility, not just what has a fancy seal stamped on it. And here's that disconnect in black and white. So look, on the left, you've got the old school markers of success, the formal degree, the official job title. But on the right, you have what actually creates value in today's world. Skills that are in high demand, and, this is the most important part, results you can actually prove. And right there, in that space between these 2 columns, that's where the opportunity lives. All right, so we've mapped out some of these friction points. The next logical question is, how do you actually operate inside them? This next part is all about the strategy, about how you position yourself in these gaps before the system notices and, rolls out a patch to fix the bug. And we need to be absolutely crystal clear on this. This is not about doing anything illegal, not at all. It's about something way more subtle. It's about operating in the gray areas. The places where technology is moving faster than the regulations, or where the rules are just too slow to keep up. It's about navigating the system by its real rules, not just the ones they write down in the manual. So you do the analysis. You look at the schematics of the system, you map out the debt-to-income ratios, you trace the social capital loops, and then you find it. You find that one exact point where the system's own logic just completely breaks down. The point where the official numbers and what's happening in the real world just don't line up anymore. That is the trigger. And that's when the override happens. This is the strategic move. It's the action you take the second you see the system's script start to glitch. You're not hacking it from the outside. You're executing a command that the system itself allows for. It just doesn't advertise it. You are literally using its own broken logic against it to create a totally new outcome. So, what's the big picture here? What are the key takeaways? Well, first, stop seeing these systems as solid, perfect monoliths and start seeing them for what they are: structures full of friction and flaws. Second, train yourself to spot that latency, that all-important gap between a system starting to fail and the rest of the world catching on. And finally, and maybe most importantly, understand that this is a much deeper game. This isn't about surface-level hustle culture. This is about deep, structural navigation. When you get right down to it, this whole framework just gives you a new lens to see the world through. The systems we all live in, they're all running on a kind of script with predictable inputs and, well, predictable outputs. And once you know that, the only question left to ask is, do you have a script of your own?